Okay, we're going to get going. Again, I'm Andrew Bing. I will be facilitating our quarters committee meeting. Thank you to all the committee members who showed up. We have people from Sussex County here who we thank for being here and for providing our food, and we have a member of the public here. I'm going to turn it over to Jen just to go over a couple things quickly as she rolls over to her slides, and then I'm going to come back, go over the agenda, kind of set the stage for what we're going to do today. And hopefully, we do expect a couple more people to show up, so hopefully that'll happen.
Hi, everybody. I hope everybody had a nice holiday and Happy New Year to everyone. I haven't seen you, I believe, since the holidays we come back from holiday. So we just have to go through the normal dot slides, which is our motto. Every trip, every mode, every dollar, and every one. That last one is very important to me. I born and raised in Kent County, but grew up spending lots of time in Sussex County with family and the beach. Unfortunately, we are, I believe, now, I don't see this one on.
Yeah, it's the new year.
Oh.
We had a bad year last year, though.
Did we reach 160? So far we've had 2 for January. I believe we reached over 160, 165. Okay. Which was the worst year for traffic fatalities in Delaware since the 1980s. I'm mute from here. Oh, I am muted. Okay. So anyway, what I want to say to that is we're working with Delaware State Police and the Office of Highway Safety, try and come up with some solutions, some programs we can implement to try and make this year a better year. What I'm still seeing on the road, and I'm sure as many of you are as well, is not just aggressive driving, but hostile driving. And if that really is our biggest kind of component for some of these fatalities, right? And the people that it's hurting aren't always the people that are driving hostily. It is hurting people, families that are traveling up and down our roads, whether they're in state or out of state. And you can see it doesn't matter. Pedestrian was hit, bicyclist. So it's kind of everybody's in this now. Please, again, we rely on our committee members, whether it be for 5 points or this committee or any other committee across the state. We're showing everybody the sign. We're saying the same things. Please tell your friends, your families, everyone you can think of to please drive more safely on our roads. And let's make 2023 better and safer here. I'm going to hand it over to
me. Excellent. Not always the funnest way to start a meeting talking about that, but that's how important it is for us to get that message across. And again, this meeting is being a virtual meeting. We are on Zoom, so there are other people listening and not just you all, and we hope to spread that message, not just to you, but to everyone. So thanks for hearing that. As always, these meetings are designed for the quarter committee members. They are open to the public. We welcome the public to come, whether virtually or in person. However, questions, discussion will be with the committee members. We will have public comment. And I am going to go through the agenda right now because we are doing our public comment a little differently tonight. So you'll see we're going to do our introductions and meeting overview. We're going to have 2 different presentations. These presentations, I mean, all presentations are important, but they really are going to build into the small group breakout sessions that we're going to do tonight. So at some point, half of you are going to go to one side, half the other. We're going to just have a little bit more of a small group discussion. And everything that Steve and Leah talk about in terms of first the existing conditions, and then as we transition to kind of our safety and capacity improvements toolbox, we're going to hope that you'll bring that over to the discussions and provide some good input. When we decided on the composition of our quarters committee, certainly it was because each of you kind of represent a different group, a different business or institution or advocacy, but it's also because each of you as an individual we thought would be good at contributing. And so now we're actually going to see if we are right when we actually get in small groups and see if we can get you all to contribute. Putting you to the test here tonight. So the reason I said it was going to be a little different, we are going to do public comment after those presentations because once public comment ends, we're going to end the virtual part of the meeting. The meeting will still be recorded, so anyone can go back and see the final part, which is when we come back from the small groups. We're going to do a report out, have a little discussion, and then again, my goal is to have us out of here by 8 o'clock. So that's what we're going to do. So for any of you who are with us virtually, again, I will come to you at a little bit of a different time for public comments, so just be prepared for that. So with that, we're going to go through introductions. You can see our project team up on the board. You've got Leah, you've got Steve, you've got Jen, you've got Dorothy Morris, the Office of State Planning. You've got Gemma, who disappeared. I couldn't find her. Again, remind me, our county folks, your names.
Jesse. And Mike.
Thanks, guys. One thing I would ask is that everyone just try to talk loudly. We are, again, virtually. We want people to be able to hear us. What I'd like you to do at this point, we're going to go around. We'll start here with Danny, right? If you could just, again, just names and who you're with, and just try to project as best you can.
Danny Rolls with Allen Rim, local trucking company.
Jeff Wells, local farming area, Wells.
Yell.
Stephanie Moody with Sussex County Association of Realtors.
Jocelyn Huff with the town of Georgetown.
Bridge Creation, Cape Henry Local Transportation.
Sean Tidwell, Penny River School District Transportation.
Brian Reynolds, President of the Fire Department. Glenn Marshall, Sussex County EMS.
George Cardwell, representing the town of Milton.
Aaron Moore, President of the Illinois Council and Fire. Will Health and Age Conservancy.
Great. And like I said, we do expect maybe to have one or two more people who said they were going to be here, but we've got a good crew. We've got a quorum. Not that we needed a quorum, but we still want to have a quorum. And so at this point, we're going to move forward with our presentations. I think. Okay, we're going to go over existing conditions. And again, this is kind of sequential. We're going to start with our existing conditions, get into our toolbox, and then roll into our small group sessions.
Thanks, Andrew. So quick overview. We talked a lot about traffic data last week. Not going to get so in depth today, but we wanted to focus on 16 and sort of update you with what we latest in our information was on how traffic moving along 16 and where it's going and what we can determine about some critical locations. So one of the first things we looked at was starting with the base of the Del vehicle volume summary. That's sort of like the planning baseline estimate. Looking, I know you can't read all the numbers, but it was sort of showing about 8,000 max average daily traffic on 16, almost funneling towards Milton, with some new counts we got in the last year or two, and a little bit of analysis using some of the big data systems we talked about last week. We're able to adjust that understanding a little bit to show that there's over 8,000 cars in the Ellendale area. And that sort of holds mostly along all the way along 16. It does drop a little bit as you head east, but we're talking 7,000 to 8,000 plus cars a day average on 16.
Steve, you say cars? Do you mean vehicles?
Vehicles, okay. Yeah, sorry. All vehicles. This is all vehicles. Thanks. And importantly, we're seeing a summer seasonal factor of approaching 30%. Of daily traffic. So those numbers are now at or over 10,000 in the worst case summer days. So talked a lot last time about, corridor being sort of a beach route, and that certainly holds up with a little more in-depth analysis. And just to give a perspective, we may be talking about 15,000 vehicles per day by 2050 as this continues to grow. A little bit digging into some of this streetlight origin destination data that we think is pretty cool. Looking at from an origin west of 113 and how the traffic behaves along 16. From west of 113, we're seeing about 60% of through traffic. 60% of the cars tracked go all the way through to SR1. So that sort of establishes that confirms 16 as sort of a true through route. These cars are destined to the beach and back, going the other way. It holds true on the other side of 113. We're not seeing a lot of drop in the track volume, which imply destinations and stops in Ellendale or even Milton. Some of the volume It does leave 16 head south on Route 30 and Route 5, typically via Route 30, and we see some traffic peel off at Mulberry Street using Cave Neck Road. So some traffic does leave 16 and head to points, you know, around Route 9 and head all the way down to the Long Neck area. What we're seeing too. Similar from east of Allendale, and I can see we're tracking more traffic. There's a lot more traffic both midweek and Saturday, and it's critical that Saturday is higher. Further supporting the beach kind of route that we're talking about. Still 60% is the number we're seeing is through traffic. First significant traffic split is at Route 30, where we lose about 17% of the track volume. The most common route from there is actually 30 down to Sand Hill Road and then over SR5. And from there, they head to the Route 9 area, or some of them are tracked all the way to Long Neck. So small percentage of traffic stopping in Milton, or whether that's downtown or points along Route 16, they keep sort of continuing, whether that's Long Neck 9 to Route 1. And again, the reverse is true. This just sort of shows that we're thinking of a west to east progression, but the percentages and overall numbers are pretty similar, looking westbound as well. So since we did identify Route 30 as a sort of breakpoint and a turnoff point for the traffic that does leave 16, we looked into that a little bit too. On a weekday, you can kind of see it's the best way to move north-south sort of through our study area between Route 1 and Route 113. And it shows, you know, from the reference point just south of 16, we're seeing cars use 16. Obviously, we just talked about, obviously, plenty of cars head up on Route 30 towards Milford. A few head east, and then southbound, you can see it splits fairly nicely, and it's some even splits, you know, 30 south of Route 9 and 5 south of Route 9 both have a pretty significant number of cars tracked from the Milton area. So that's a logical alternate route to avoid the regular congestion we see on 113 in Georgetown and Route 1 in Lewis. And difference on Saturday is pretty stark. You have a lot more traffic on 30 on a summer Saturday. You have more now the 30, especially southbound. We're tracking 7,000 vehicles, which is almost double what we were tracking on a weekday, and we have just under half of that staying on 30 south of 9, which is really the cut through route all the way down to Millsboro. So sort of confirms that 30 is now like a tertiary beach route on weekends, especially. You have Route 1, you have 113. And
I kind of wish IG Burton was here when he was councilman. He and I talked endlessly about Route 30 being kind of the new highway, north-south route through Sussex County, especially with the Bay Health campus. I mean, like looking at these numbers, right? Like the 4,000, I was like, oh, the Bay Health campus now it has AI DuPont on there. That's what the traffic is. But if you look at it, how much it increases with the weekend, that campus isn't really open. So yeah, it's definitely visitors to the area.
And so this is summer traffic we're looking at. It's the worst case, but it sort of shows the growth and patterns pretty clearly. All right, so just to sort of summarize quickly, in one spot, we definitely sort of consider Route 16 one of the northern beach routes, and the typical associated characteristics that go with that: high through traffic, higher weekend than weekday volumes, higher summer volumes than outside off-season volumes, and sort of low OD traffic, local OD traffic in Allendale and Milton. We sort of learned that the volumes are slightly higher on the west side of the study area, but they're pretty consistent overall. But Allendale does sort of see that first rush of traffic along 16. So with the volume we're at, we may be talking about some of these high volume side street intersections may start needing improvements for safety or operational issues that may be starting to arise or may already be there. So of the traffic that does not stay on 16, a common sort of route is 330 to Sand Hill Road to SR5. That's the point south. We're not seeing that traffic go all the way to Route 1 as sort of a bypass type traffic, just trying to avoid 16. 16 still moves pretty well. carry a lot of through traffic, but these are, it's a common way to get to points in that area. So that's good to know. And 30 is sort of typically day-to-day balance, north-south distributor. You can see it's split traffic, a lot of local traffic on Route 30. But in the peak times, like summer Saturdays, we do see a lot more sort of regional throughput. So now Leah's gonna talk a little bit, help me out.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so obviously Steve gave us a really good overview of what's happening now. And he did mention one kind of, maybe by 2050, we'll see things grow up to even a higher threshold of 15,000 cars a day during summer peak. So one other thing we want to look at is what's coming, right? So we do, and I'm sure many of you know, there are other developments and DELDOT projects coming along the 16 corridor right now. So we're going to walk you through from west to east, what's kind of in the pipeline right now. But also we want to hear kind of, as we break into small groups, we'll have staff who can fill in more details. So you may have questions about some of these projects. I know I do, everyone else in the room, but would encourage you to kind of make note of those. And when we break out the small groups, we'll have folks from the county here, from state planning here, and Steve can speak to some of the DELDOT capital projects. So starting right at the intersection of 113, I'm sure some of you are aware there is what is called a grade separated intersection coming in at that intersection. It is still in preliminary engineering. We haven't really started design, and by we I mean DELDOT has not started design on it yet. So this is actually a good opportunity to weigh in on that, because any feedback you provide will take to the DELDOT project engineers. But basically, I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. Basically, 113 will go over and 16 will come underneath the roadway. So similar to what's going on at the other end of 16 where it meets Route 1, which we'll have a pretty picture of here at the end. So the reason for that though is volume, but it's more for safety. So that intersection over the past couple years has kind of come up on the state's radar as a high incident location. So the best way to avoid conflicts obviously is to separating the grade of those things traveling. Also, grade separated intersections are coming in along 113 and heading south from that point. So there's a series of those that will be coming in the coming years. Also, we have some development proposals right for that intersection. So one right at that northwest corner is called the Enclave at Starwood. That project has been submitted to the state. It's gone through the plus process. Dorothy in the back knows more about that than we could ask to know. So, but that development is proposed in what the state calls level 4. And level 4 is where the state really only wants to see agricultural or conserved land. It's not a place where the state wants to fund infrastructure investment. So they're in conversations, the developers in conversations with the state's going to provide feedback, but really per state planning, that's kind of an area where we more want to see those lands conserved without development. But you know, oftentimes developers see that a big grade separated intersection is coming in, and maybe that's an opportunity.
So they are seeking annexation out of Allendale, that hopefully will happen within the first 6 months of the year.
Okay, so they are seeking annexation into the town of Allendale. Very interesting news, and that is underway. So again, someone else in the room who can speak to a more updated situation. So as we continue into the town of Allendale, we also have a proposed development to the southeast corner. That is called Newdale Acres. That's another 296 residential units being proposed. And that one is a little bit further along in the process. That subdivision has been reported. They just have not started construction yet. So that one's coming. Oh, yep. Another update.
That one has been annexed to Belleville, and they have started construction in there, so they're going to start construction else for the next few years.
Okay, so construction coming soon, and has been annexed into the town. Very good. Thank you for that update. So that's another big impact in that direct area and vicinity. So of course, we care about this, obviously, because this is going to be more cars on 16, of course, as well as surrounding roadways. Going north of 16, Ingram Village, we know this one has been annexed to the town and is already under construction. So many of you are probably familiar with the new homes going in back there. Total of 373 residential units. So, and then lastly, right in the vicinity is Gary Farm, which is on the west side of Northwold State Road. And that also has been through the plus process. Do you have any updates on that?
They'll be on the same timeline as the Enclave of Starwood.
As the Enclave of Starwood. So the same timeline as the bigger development to the west. And that's another 491 units. So I think you all are seeing why we're all here tonight, is there's a lot of development coming, and we definitely need to start preparing for that growth.
And just to kind of put a punctuation mark on this with Ellendale, what was your census number?
So our census number was around 500, and with so there's actually two developments that I guess are not going to show up here, but that touch the two of the developments that are shown. And if everything gets annexed in like it's supposed to, yada yada yada, 5,500.
Right, 5,500 homes, correct? Units.
So yeah, it's an interesting mix. It's probably 25 to 3,000 houses.
Okay.
300,000 square feet.
But that's almost quadruple the population of Ellendale in the course of maybe over the course of maybe 4 or 5 years.
And what we can do for you all, we can touch base and get the information on those other developments you mentioned, and we'll distribute a revised version of this presentation that builds in the information we're hearing tonight, so everyone has.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear, like what their census number was for 2020 and what their census number will be in 10 years. Well, within 5 years, probably. But right, it could. It could. Mr. Culver's like shaking his head.
All right. So continuing east, obviously we get a little bit more rural in character again as we head towards Milton. But we did want to briefly touch on the intersection of 30. As Steve said, this is a primary north-south route, and the intersection right now is pretty straightforward and basic. So Steve, if you could walk through these two diagrams on the screen for us. And I know you probably can't read the numbers on the screen, but you probably can on your handout if you want to take a look at this.
Yeah, so we didn't this one didn't show up on our counts or models or even INRIX much as like a huge problem, but we did get a comment at the first meeting. There's some frustrations here. Jen has shared her local knowledge of there's a lot of trucks. There's just because the intersection is only one lane on each approach. There's a lot of waiting and yielding and problems queuing and stuff like that. So what does show up on INRIX a little bit is that less than half the cars that go through this intersection on a typical, I think, midday in the summer get through on green. So, more than half people are stopping here. Maybe that's an issue or balanced. It runs, maybe this runs free. There's some issues we could look into there, but starting to see just from anecdotal evidence and some of this deeper big data that there's some things that could some needs here. This was also identified in a 2017 AGP hazard elimination program as a safety issue. So after a study there and some analysis from that federal program, it's currently proposed in the CTP as a roundabout to be installed there, which would improve the safety issues. Right now, it's planned for construction in 2025. And we think that's a decent idea, but obviously want to hear from you. It's still in the planning stage.
And just tonight, as I was coming through this intersection, there was a truck making a left-hand turn to head west as people were coming south. And so he had everybody lined up behind him waiting to turn. If the roundabout were to be implemented, he would have made that movement seamlessly. And so nobody would have been held up at that intersection. So that was kind of, for me, a good kind of example of how it does stack up.
Question for, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
So a couple things. The analysis takes into effect account the turn radius for the trucks.
Yeah, it'll be designed. Typically, the roundabout.
Understanding the future design role, the current.
The current.
That there's not much of an issue there.
In terms of like delay capacity, we had geometric wise, no, it didn't get into turn radius.
Because I don't see anywhere when you've got a 45-foot turning radius.
Yeah, I mean
that's trucks in all four approaches. So how
right, and that's what she's saying. I mean, the trucks
travel lane.
Right.
Even when they have time to turn, they need extra time and space to complete the movement because it's so tight.
I use that intersection much later because what I see is when there's a truck there trying to make a left turn, that obviously traffic doesn't clear. sometimes not even 2 cycles.
Correct. Correct. With the number of vehicles behind us, that truck, I don't know.
Understood. I mean,
Correct,
We're,
yep.
we're sort of learning as not through our, the counts don't show that, and even the index delay doesn't show that. But nothing, we got to use all these together and the local knowledge to sort of form a picture. But it did.
That's why we got you. That's why we have. That's why we have all of you here, because it was just me saying this isn't right, this isn't true, this isn't reflecting what I see. So I need more voices to be able to say that out loud.
And it was identified as a safety program, as a safety problem, and that's what's really going to lead to improvements, probably even before anything we would identify here and move forward.
I trust roundabout winds up taking the temporary storage. Right now, there's no access to people there, and I mean that becomes the other issue.
Yeah, it's hard to say right now.
That's hard to say because it's up to our right-of-way acquisition team to go out and do the purchases. So yeah, that would be, and that's still, we're not even in design. Yeah, so that's still a couple years off. Yep.
Yeah, so continue, also at that corner, excuse me, the corner of 30 and 16, we have Milton Village being proposed, which is another
They've started.
very large development. Yes.
And there's another just to the east. I don't know.
They've already started this?
It's pretty much, is correct?
Right. It's under construction.
That's under construction.
Okay.
I think there's a small portion of this.
So I think part of the site might be, but the fuller residential
Residential
development. Yeah, but the commercial piece.
Commercial piece is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just to the east of that, Jack Lingo has a list for another 60 acres of Rome's one of the books up to shipbuilders.
Okay.
So
Yep.
see that little cutout for the house?
Yep.
It's going to be everything to the east of that house property.
Okay.
Am I right on that, Jeff?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. I thought that as well. Yeah.
So, and then also to the south, so where 16 is not on this map here, this is down below, a little further south, below Sand Hill Road on 30. Also a very major development coming into Granary. And that's the largest development we've talked about tonight. It's over 1,300 units, plus shopping center. So again, as part of the review process for this, we know the intersection with 30 and 16 is going to be addressed with offset improvements potentially.
And they are annexing into the town of Milton. They have already. Okay.
You have 697 started just to the west of that on Route 30 and Shingle.
Oh, that's the other development that came in a couple years ago, right?
They have not annexed.
They have not.
They have not completed annexation.
Did they express intent? Okay. Yep.
This is good discussion that we want to have. We want to have most of it during the small group, but that's good. I mean,
no, thank you all
for sharing this.
Your local knowledge. So moving a little further east to 16 at 5, another intersection that we know needs some attention.
Yeah, let's just show the contrast in the index data where now we're starting to see similar issues that you're experiencing are showing up in the data, where just all approaches are sort of locked up with one lane. People are getting stuck behind trucks, each other, left turns, anything. And also here, even less people get through on green without stopping. So.
And also, Royal Farms development is proposed at the northwest corner of that intersection. That's currently going through the DelDOT review process. So no updates from how that's going to play out yet, as far as any offsite improvements they're going to be required to make. But we do know that is consideration both at 5 and also on that western road there, Mulberry Street. That also is an intersection that's been problematic and will also be impacted by the Granary development. So that all areas that we want to discuss when we get into our small groups. And I think most of you know this, but just to kind of make our way all the way over to SR1. Obviously barrels are on the ground right now. We drove through it on our way here. The grade separated intersection at 16. So here is a rendering of that. And again, this is similar to what would bookend our project over at 113 once that is designed. So you can see Route 1 passing over 16 there. I know I've talked to some of you about some concerns about how this will impact downstream traffic and crossings. So there was an analysis done to speak to that, so we can get into that if anyone has questions once we break up. But we're going to transition now. So thank you all for the great feedback about projects. I encourage you to shoot myself an email, because again, we can kind of assemble all of the new information we heard from you and distribute that to the group so everyone has it. But now we're going to get into what can we do about all this, right? I think we all know that 16 can't remain the way it is now and accommodate all of this growth and allow people to safely and efficiently move through the area. So we're going to be talking about kind of 3 different categories of improvements we can entertain. One's at the network level. It's kind of big picture, how, moving through the entire area. One's at the roadway level, and then one's at the intersection level. So we're going to kind of walk through that. And we're calling it safety and capacity because those are really our 2 goals here. I want to highlight that one clause from the DelDOT mission statement: every trip. We strive to make every trip taken in Delaware safe. That's first and foremost. We want people to be able to get to where they're going safely, and reliable and convenient. So that reliability and convenience really speaks to why we care about capacity improvements, is to make sure that folks can leave their driveway, get to where they're going in a timely fashion. So I assume a number of you are familiar with the 5 groups working group process that's been going on. Glenn, I know you serve on that body as well. Thank you. It's been years. And we're kicking this off a little bit further ahead than we did with 5 points. 5 points was kind of reacting to things failing. We're still ahead of the game a little bit with this group. But one thing we did with 5 points is kind of classify our types of improvements according to how much they're going to cost, how much time they're going to take to get on the ground, and how much impact they're going to have. So you'll see as we go through our kind of toolbox ideas, we'll have classifications next to each of them. So some of them are going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, and have a lot of impact, but there's some other improvements that can be quick and get on the ground quickly with relatively little pain to the surrounding properties and less cost, which is, a win-win. So obviously we always have trade-offs, and that's something we hope to talk with you all tonight. So Steve is going to walk us through our toolbox, and part of the reason we gave you all handouts is so when we break into our small groups, you have that as a reference, and we even have a quick cheat sheet for you too. So
well, the main point of this is to sort of put some ideas in your head. Maybe you can think as we go through how they may be useful in different points along the corridor around the towns. So sort of run through. I'm not going to read every pro and con for every slide. You can reference this in your groups or before or after. But so just to give some ideas of some network level, some sort of big picture improvements DelDOT might look at. Obviously, we could build a whole new road, right? That would be the most capacity gain, whole new from 0 to roadway, right? We're doing that for the North Millsboro bypass, for example, down Millsboro. But obviously that takes a lot of money, time, and it's a huge impact to environment, properties, everything. So use that sparingly, but it's something that we can consider. Similar, but a little more localized. Obviously, GSI projects are all the rage on 113 and then Route 1 right now. So you consider where a grade separation may be useful. It's not, again, not cheap, not impactful either, and it takes time, but it's a little more limited than building a whole new road. We can realign a road from more significant, like the Park Avenue relocation underway. That's sort of almost building a new road. Look at it as a new road / realignment, or small scale where we took a bad intersection that was skewed in the airport road in Sand Hill Road, Route 9, and just sort of realigned it to really improve operation, safety, capacity, give us some more options there. So this, sort of depends, but a lot of things you can gain with those. And then one thing we wanted to talk about that's typically more on the developer, but since we have so many developer projects, we want to make sure that we're keeping interconnectivity of parcels and towns and the existing roadway network, good. So when developers come in, they obviously fund the roads in their parcel. To save money, they may only propose 1 or 2 points of access to the network. We want to make sure that we're connecting the roads that need to be connected, that make sense to be connected for both vehicles and bikes, all the other modes of travel. Also helps out with other pinch points, because it gives you some alternate routes. It gives emergency response more access to the town and to the parcel. And like I mentioned, biking and walking is improved. So focusing into things you can sort of do on the existing roadway alignment. Obviously you can widen the road. One of the things we'll talk about more probably on Route 9, but going on, we're widening 24 right now. We're widening Route 9 to a point right now. In the Lewis and Rehoboth area. So typically when we reach full capacity, a lot of intersections, when we sort of run out of improvements to make, turn lanes to add, it just becomes, it doesn't make sense to keep sort of putting band-aids on the problem intersection by intersection. It may make sense to look at a widening approach where you go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes.
Could you put that in context, though, Steve? So right now 16 is 2 lanes.
Yeah.
And we're talking about maybe eventual volumes of 15,000 by 2050. Would that be a 4-lane road, or is that? That's
what we talked a lot about that last meeting. That's 15,000 sort of borderline. We presented 20,000 as the level last week where we sort of expect to need to go 4 lanes. But a lot of that depends on the side streets and how much traffic's crossing your busy 15,000 ADT road, right? So as we focus on intersections and as some of these side streets grow and need signals or need roundabouts, we just have to take like a holistic look at the road and see if it makes more sense to treat intersection by intersection, or if there's a desire to blow.
I just wanted, for everybody's understanding, I want to make sure it's clear that when we're talking cost, if you're not within a municipality, we're talking state taxpayers' cost, not Sussex County. There are no county roads. They are all state maintained. So again, you are spending money from everyone that lives in the state of Delaware. So I just wanted to make sure we understand that, because sometimes people are like, well, why can't you just widen this? Or why can't you just add a new road? And it's like, that is a big ask, right? For the entire taxpayer base, for one county to have kind of happening. We don't have a 95 down here, fortunately or unfortunately, to kind of move traffic quickly through. So yeah, this is why we're here, to kind of talk about all these things and what these tools can do to help improve what we do have, the infrastructure.
I think
that's
the point of the group is what would you guys like to see? Would you like to see a road that expands and carries through traffic, through or around your towns, or would you like to see keep the feel of the 2-lane road and do what we can to improve intersections and build roundabouts or signals or always stop, or things we can do to other items in the toolbox?
Can you clarify where that average comes from? Is that a 365 rule? Where that 15,000?
That's like the worst case in 2050. So right now, 365 average is only about 8,000 cars per day. In the summer today, we're talking 25–30% higher than that. So you're talking 10,000, 11,000 in spots. The projections for almost 30 years from now, we're saying that 10, 11,000 might grow to 15,000 on a typical summer 24-hour day in 2050. So
I'm just trying to find out where the numbers will come.
Understood. I'm throwing a lot of numbers out, and even different time periods gets confusing. So that's why it's hard to say right now. Because 15,000 is your worst case, and that's even borderline necessarily needing 4 lanes. So the thought maybe right now is probably not needed to design for the worst case day in 30 years from now, right? So, but we're going to make sure we're studying all.
I think Glenn's thinking opposite, but that's okay. That's okay.
We all have our.
5,000 Elmdale, 5,000 10,000 daily troops right.
My concern is always, and this goes to the schools mostly, right? Like, so by the time we get a new school online, we're already over capacity. And that's concerning to me. Like, that's in the back of my head every time we talk about that. So yeah, your concerns are valid. So yeah, we're just, yeah.
a good point.
We can build houses a lot faster than we can build them out.
Correct. Correct.
I think that's, we're also finding the development aspect is almost overpowering our like base model of growth that we like. It includes a lot of estimated development and even some actual, you know, development in the zones, how it runs its peninsula model type analysis. But in a lot of these intersections, and even along 16, where there's so much development, the developers and the actual or, you know, projected ODs from the development, once you add them up, may tell a different story. So
if I could add one more thing too, if you go into the state's database and look at the projects, you see a lot of 2008 dates in there that never got built, right? So although we have a lot of things on the books right now and a lot of grand plans, we do not know what the next 5-10 years are going to hold as far as how many of those actually end up on the ground. So, you know, yes, worst case scenario, we try to be as conservative as possible when we're estimating these numbers, but it's a fine line because who knows what the economy is going to do in the future. Because again, we were looking at this exact scenario 15 years ago and it never materialized. So it has a little late, but it's a hard game to play. None of us have a crystal ball.
I was saying all going to go in, but there's a lot. It is
Yes,
definitely going in.
Yeah.
Shovels are in the ground.
Yes. Another thing, short of pool widening, we can add a two-way left turn lane or center turn lane. Doing that in the area of 24 or 523, sort of west of where we fully widened. There's more of this going in, which separates the left turn traffic, especially in an area where there's a lot of commercial access to their driveways. It can be beneficial to keep the through lanes moving. Downsides, obviously, is some people call these, you know, suicide lanes. What do you call them, Jen?
That's what I call it.
Yes. So there may be some safety concerns if they're not done properly, or with some.
And there's been comments that people who travel to this area that maybe not coming from somewhere where they have these don't know how to utilize these. And I know there's one on 14, I call it, but Front Street in Milford, right at the BP station where the shopping center is, where if you're not careful, it could end up somebody coming to turn into the BP gas station and somebody trying to turn into the shopping center are going to crash into each other if they're not careful. So it happens where you got to make sure the alignments are done correctly, right? So that's kind of,
yeah, you got to be done smart.
Yeah.
Adding a frontage or service road. A lot of the SR1 interchange projects are sort of including these to maintain access to parcels. So this is sort of a way to combine a bunch of access points along a frontage road to then access the major route.
so one of the biggest ones in the area, most of you probably would be recognized, are just after you go over the Bay Bridge. You get off for Wawa or McDonald's. Those are service roads that actually were built in by Maryland DOT. For those businesses, for the people to keep going on 50, while everybody that needs to peel off is able to kind of do so safely. So that's what a service road would look like.
All right, then toolbox gets down to the intersection level, sort of smaller scale, but cheaper and more quick win things you can do. Obviously, you can add a turn lane, add a right turn lane. Included these pictures. I thought it was a good way to visualize like how something as simple as a right turn lane can improve traffic flow. Because if that car truck on the left side is slowing down to turn and make that turn, you're slowing down to 10 miles an hour behind it, so it can complete its turn. And anyone behind you is now you know, accordioning. So as soon as you build that turn lane, you can get out, you can decelerate in the turn lane, and you can maintain good flow numbers. So that's a good way if you sort of consistently provide that to maintain good through flow in the one lane. Same thing with left turn lanes, similar thought, maybe even more dangerous when people actually are waiting stops, so yielding to oncoming traffic, waiting to turn left at an uncontrolled intersection. You might have somebody get rear-ended, somebody that moved out of the way at the last second, the car behind them can't see. So we see a lot of rear end, I call sitting duck rear end crashes. Also provides some market benefits to right turns. Always stop control. Something DelDOT's had a fair amount of success statewide with safety benefits. So there are specific volume and crash warrants provided in the METCD, and so you can't just put these in anywhere. And they're not meant to be used as a speed control measure. That's specifically stated, and we get questions about that a fair amount. But where they've been used appropriately, they've been shown to provide some significant safety benefits. This is a Bell table from a recent study of 20 recently converted stop controls, sort of before after basic analysis. We've reduced crashes 71%, severe injury crashes 90%. Those are incredible numbers. A pretty good sample of always stop control conversions that were sort of two-way stop control is sort of uncontrolled on the major approach. Now we're stopping all that traffic, making sure everyone can see and moving at a slower rate. Real benefits there. Pretty quick and easy to do that. Roundabout, great tool. States becoming more and more familiar and comfortable with. These diagrams are from Federal Highway, but they show all the conflict points, vehicle and pedestrians you can experience a standard 2-lane 4-way intersection. You have left turns, throughs, crossing all sorts of paths, have lots of ped conflicts. You make everyone turn right at a roundabout. You really minimize the conflict points, and you minimize the severity of the conflicts. They go from angle to sort of side swipe type crashes. You also get you keep people moving, so you get a higher throughput than a typical always stop intersection. With proper design, they can lower speeds as well as you sort of deflect traffic into the roundabout circulating road. Obviously, they require a lot of space, but been successful with some implementations of compact roundabouts or even mini roundabouts in places. A little more planning time to implement, and a little more impact construction.
Unless the incoming development builds it as they did on New Road, right? So the Groom property, which was, I forget the name of the development now, but on New Road where the roundabout exists now, that was actually built by the developer as part of that neighborhood for us. So they can build them faster than we can.
Yeah, this one along Sand Hill Road. I'm not sure if that was part of the GG project or the developer. I know there's a big developer project Westlake there too. So I forget.
There was.
But yeah, they're popping up throughout the county and throughout the state. Obviously, signalization's always an option. Don't probably need to explain that too much. People understand signals. One thing we say about them is we can reduce the angle and the injury crashes a lot of times where we have sort of severe crash problems, T-bone angle crash problems, but they do often increase rear end crashes and just sort of the less severe property damage crashes. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. But installing a signal allows us sort of a whole mini signal toolbox of things we can do, from adding turn lanes in the signal to changing the phasing of the left turns, whether that's protected only or giving you a flashing red arrow. You can change the side street phasing if you need. If they can go at the same time without hitting each other, that's great. That improves capacity. But if it's a safety issue, you can split. So one side goes and the other. Signal timing adjustments, coordination adjustments with other signals, and obviously widening comes into play here too. The pros and cons there. Back to Andrew.
Okay, so I know we went through that quickly. We're gonna have more time to now go through that. Before we break up into our small groups, I wanted to see if there was any public comment, either by anyone who's on with us virtually or any members of our public who are here. We have one gentleman here, I spoke to him. I think he's just here to observe from within the development community, we'll say very broadly. But just here listening, learning, but if anyone who's online is interested in any kind of public comment, you just have to kind of let us know through the chat, or is it the
raise your hand or through Q&A.
But
we don't have any open questions.
Yeah. So just introduce yourself and then just quickly, like 30 seconds. If you,
my name's Greg Wooding. I'm commercial development on private state. My question is to Del. I see what you're doing on Route 1, the 16th and over underpass. I know you're planning on doing it in the 16th and 113th. Has there been any funding dedicated to that yet? I know they talked about it since 89 or 98, and they keep pushing it out. You keep saying it's a need, but I don't see the funding to move forward. If it has, what the timing is for that, or there may be any early takings for that. In that way.
I can answer some of that for you. So the 113 grade separated intersections were kind of put on hold because of the Millsboro bypass. We had some holdups with that and trying to get it on the right alignment that everybody could agree with. And so then we started staging. Once that became or got the compromise worked out for the bypass, we were then able to go back to the 113 study and start bringing some of the other grade separated intersections online in our capital transportation program, which is actually now, can you pull that up? Yeah. 113 at 16 is programmed. I just need to know, she's going to pull up and let me know when we're going to have the funding start for design. I'm thinking it's 25, 26.
Dan, could you restate paraphrase version of the question? I don't think the folks online.
Oh, sure. So the question that the gentleman asked was, he knows that we're currently building and in construction for the grade separated intersection at 16 and SR1. And his question was, when would DelDOT be having funding available for the grade separated intersection that is currently programmed at 113 and 16 just outside of Ellendale? Soon to be inside of Ellendale.
Bear with me a moment if anyone else has any comments.
So, well, let me just real quick, I'll go real quickly through the process. So once it's funded for design, and we go through kind of a lengthy design process that includes a public workshop. After we have kind of a concept decided on, that's when the right-of-way acquisition process begins. However, we have the ability, thanks to the Best family, who advanced the property from their Ace Hardware store in Lewis. We changed kind of the regulations where now you can request for us to purchase your property if you're wanting us to buy it. And there's an active project already programmed, because that actually is helpful to the state as a whole. When the Best family approached us, we were already going to have conversations with them in regards to the project that was coming online, which is going to build right now in Lewis.
So, my second part of the question is, out of all the projects DelDOT has, I think the improvements from there is like 103 out of 105 projects. That's why I'm just wondering the timing of it, does it accelerate up to 1 or 2 from 103?
Right. So what happens is, so this year we're going to develop the next cycle for capital transportation projects. And what happens is I sit in and submit all of my projects for Sussex County. And I say, this is where this project came from. Here's the study information. Here's the validation for it, because we're talking 80% federal money. So we have to have really good justification to say, we want this project programmed. So just because that project's at number 103 right now, as the CTP moves forward every 2 years, it will move up the line, right? And so you'll see each project come online in the 2-year CTP submission, and then the next 2 years it's going to move up because you're going to have the other projects come in underneath. And so what we do is we program those projects into the out years, right? And so that's design started for the last CTP in 2008. So yeah, so the next CTP we're going to be doing is 25-30. So yeah, I mean it'll move. I promise. It's
an update. It shows preliminary engineering in FY23 or FY25.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think it's a little bit of misconception. I mean, I don't think because it's 103 it means they're gonna finish 102 projects before it. Like,
yeah, no,
it's ranked differently, but when the funding's available, I mean, the project rank 101 is going into construction, under construction.
Right, and understand that we have from all 3 counties, right? So just because it's 103, that doesn't mean that a Newcastle County or a Kent County project is going to go before it. There's Project Development South that only handles this section of Sussex.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep moving us.
I'm sorry, we have a question in Q&A as well.
Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
We're going to move on. So I'm going to introduce our small groups here. Lee, I don't know if you can also move the slide over one. So we're going to break up into two groups. We have 11 of you here. So we'd like 6 of you at one table, 5 of you at the other table. We don't care which table you go to. We would just like to see a little diversity. So for instance, Richard and Sean, if you guys as school transportation could just be at separate tables. If there's 2 people in from Milton, try to go to separate tables. Just try to kind of direct yourself to the table. So we'll have staff members there. We'll have others sort of floating around, able to answer questions.
We have Dorothy Morris from the Office of State Planning. Glenn, we're going to ask you to choose a side. However, if anyone has questions for emergency services or responses, I'd like Glenn to kind of float as well, if he can. And he's from 5 Points.
We've got Brian Reynolds, and
right.
Aaron. So I mean, I think we'll, we'll be able to probably get there. So what I am going to ask is when you get to your table, we're going to ask one of you to kind of do a report out for each of your tables. We're going to help you, but we'd like one of you to actually do that. So that'll be the first thing we need to agree on. We're going to have maps there that are going to, again, we're just focused on 16 tonight. We're going to get to 4, 4, and 9 at our next meeting. But we're going to have one map that's SR16 at 113 in Ellendale, second map, which is SR16 at SR30, and the third map at SR16 and SR5 and Milton. We're going to move west to east, so we'll start again with map 1. It'll be up to myself, but with Delia to make sure we save adequate time for each of those locations. We don't want to get bogged down. So why are we asking this of you? We understand that most of you are not transportation experts. We're not looking for you to be that, but you are local experts. You do live here, you work here. You lead these communities in many ways. And so that is important. We're looking to get these ideas from that toolbox and have you say, here in Ellendale, hey, there's an interchange already planned. Maybe we could do X or maybe we could do Y. Have you thought of this? Can we possibly do this? Simply by you all stating that does not mean it's just going to happen. There's a process it goes through, but we want to hear from you and what your thoughts are on that. So we're going to have different colored pens. We've got a whole process down. It should go smoothly, and that's what we're going to do now. So if we can kind of we're a little behind schedule. I want to try to get us out here at 8, but let's get there, and staff, if we can get there.
Yeah, and for those of you, feel free to keep doing your thing, committee members, but members of the public who joined us via Zoom, thank you. We are going to conclude the Zoom recording right now, but we will record the report outs from the small group activities and make sure that that whole video will be posted on the project website. So please stay tuned to the project website for that update, and we'll also post the notes from this exercise for you to review. So thank you for coming out tonight. And if you have any other comments or feedback for us, we are ready to hear you. So please send them our way via the project website. I'll drop it in the link for you all.
Thank you again to everyone for participating in that process. Our group initially struggled because you're looking at a lot of open space and being told it's coming, but it's not here yet. And it's hard to know some of the details of these developments. Where are they going to exit? Onto which roads? Where are they coming from? What is it going to really impact? With that said, there was some talk in our group about, this is now focusing on SR1 at US 113 in Ellendale, just for the people who on recording. So there was some talk about a potential bypass around 16, around Ellendale, bypassing Ellendale, kind of paralleling 16. But as you can expect, there was some concerns with doing that. Farmland impacts, conservation concerns, what are you going through to accomplish that? And so that was definitely, and there was also just the general question, is there really a need for that? Are we going to have that kind of volume of traffic? And where would it go? What would that alignment be? Again, getting back to the farmland conservation concerns. There was also some concerns, I know it's not written here, that as these towns are growing, more and more businesses are going to come to Ellendale. Well, if you're now bypassing it, what does that impact on those businesses? But one of the pros was trying to separate local traffic from through traffic. You're trying to get that local traffic to stay on the local roads and be able to access whatever is on those roads. But those people who are just looking to get from point A to point B, let's get them there and not clog up all the other roads. We did talk about roundabouts as a potential solution for some of the intersections, but we had some concerns about how they're designed for buses and trucks and their ability to actually maneuver around those roundabouts. That's a big concern, making sure they're big enough. There was some talk about a spur north of 16 on 113 to connect to the new development. So as you're coming south on 113, maybe there can be some kind of a spur off of that before you get to 16 as a way for some of those new developments to be able to access some of them. Is that the same?
Somebody had commented that currently there doesn't seem to be issues at Old State Road and 16, but we did also talk about some ideas to improve it for the future. Okay, so we talked about a signal at State Road and 16. The risk is, will it create a backup there? If you put that signal, turn lanes at State Road and 16. What's that word? To help get out of the new development. Yeah, right. That was a big concern. All these developments coming in, how are you going to get them out on the roads without clogging everything? And then we also talked about interconnectivity with and between new developments. So, you know, as all these developments are coming, we need to figure out a way that we can get from development to development to development without having to get on 16 or at some of these other roads. And that, you know, mostly talking about like bike and ped, you know, not making these little islands, but making them kind of connect to each other. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm glad you ended with bike and pedestrian connectivity because we spent a lot of time talking about this. We also got to cheat because Aaron was in our group. So he knew obviously everything that's going on in Ellendale and the fact that Ellendale actually requires that connectivity from their developments. So we talked about improving 16 for bikes moving along it and also people crossing it. So especially with those new developments coming into the north side of 16 and wanting to get to the great restaurants in town right now, and obviously more restaurants to come. And also with the town annexing property and a development to the west of 113, making sure that that future grade separated intersection is going to have a way for people walking or biking to get there. So I think that acknowledges the impact that if we take some of those really short trips that would be like a 3-minute car drive and turn that into a walk or a bike ride, that's going to help deal with traffic moving through the town. Also, Glenn shared a lot of great feedback about concerns with emergency services coming through the area, right? So that still, we want to make sure that even as the road becomes more bike friendly and pedestrian friendly, that there's designated facilities for those groups moving through and we don't have conflicts on the road because that's not going to make it safe for them to move through quickly. Also, right now, on-street parking is technically allowed through the town, but no, everyone's scared to park there because cars are moving so quick. So that gives us that opportunity by eliminating that technically allowed on-street parking, which isn't really going to hurt anyone, to have that bike connection. Also, a lot of organized bike rides come through right now. So better accommodating those folks, and pedestrian crossings were the other thing we talked about. So your group mentioned a potential signal at North Old State Road, and I think one is coming as part of the development. So that will be a signalized intersection there already. The big concern and the reason to date we've not been able to get more crossings across 16, pedestrian crossings on 16 is because the curb ramps and sidewalks are not ADA compliant. And you cannot have a crosswalk in a place that cannot accommodate that. So that's going to be a concern, I think, in talking with Delta and developers coming in, is to like make those improvements. So we have those options hand in hand with development, and we have everything supported.
All right, we're going to move to SR16 and SR30. Again, we talked about roundabouts. You know, our group was, I think, skeptical of roundabouts because, you know, some past experiences with them. So I think it's really important that we find the right design for them that accommodates all of the different uses that will be on there. But so there was a concern. There was also, just because of the amount of two-way volume. So not only do you have significant traffic on 16, but a lot of cars on 30, can the roundabout handle that volume coming in 2 or 4 directions into that spot? We talked about widening of 16 to 4 lanes. There definitely is interest in exploring that. You know, when you look at the map, it looks open. It looks like there's a little bit more space to be able to accommodate maybe turning that into 4 lanes. But there was some talk about where do you start that? Do you have to really start that right at, you know, where Ellendale kind of ends and you get into some of the more open space, or as you get closer to Milton, kind of where should that starting point be? Or should it be the whole way? You know, and again, same concern. I mean, everyone was a little cautious. Is there a need to do that? Do we know there's that need? Is it going to be too much? Preference to build now instead of waiting for the homes to come. I mean, we're trying to get out in front of this. So we would like to look at how to make that dualization, make it 4 lanes sooner rather than later. And then also acceleration and deceleration lanes needed at the new driveways, new entrances to these developments. Make sure there's a separate lane for them to get into those developments and out of those developments without having to turn directly onto 16 or 30.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So we had some concern with at the intersection itself. Obviously, there's a couple businesses there, and concern about that roundabout displacing or giving those businesses some issues. So that's something we want to make sure the design team at DELDOT considers, is minimizing those impacts if possible. Also, really had a bigger conversation about new developments and access by school buses, access by fire equipment, EMS. You know, local streets, especially being a little too narrow for them to circulate in and around the development. We didn't get as much into the widening at this point in the conversation, although we did talk about that once we move on to in town at Milton. And I think I want to add before you guys go is that, you know, I think the town of Milton itself kind of sees 16 as kind of a new main street as that develops with more commercial destinations, which is kind of at odds with it becoming a bigger through road. But there's an acknowledgement that with the volume coming through, there may need to be some sort of bypass opportunity, with the acknowledgement that a lot of that volume wants to go south of the town. So there's maybe a more easy northern bypass option. That's not really where people want to go. They want to go to the south. So how do we kind of solve that problem?
So can I throw this out real quick? So what's really funny about that is that the #1 route to the beach used to be 9 and 404, and now people have taken it to 16. So they actually went north. I'm just saying. Just throwing that out there.
So 16 and 5 and Milton. The 16 and 5 intersection, our group wanted to look at turn lanes and turn phases as a way of addressing that intersection. Widening 16 to 4 lanes from 30 to 1 was definitely talked about. I mean, we recognize the same concerns that you just said, Leah, that, you know, Milton, what it is now, what it's going to become, that we need more capacity through Milton. But even though some were saying that, some were not thrilled about the idea, but they felt it was preferable to a bypass. If we had to get another set of lanes, they thought 4 lanes through Milton rather than a bypass. So again, we have a little bit of a difference of opinion. What does this say here? Oh, we talked about, you know, if there was a way to have 4 lanes through Milton, maybe one of those lanes is kind of a dedicated through lane and one of them is a local lane. So that was something, and that could work maybe for Ellendale as well. We talked about service roads. Again, it's hard to look at the map and say, well, how do you do it? Where do you put it? But that's for Steve to figure out. If can address the 5 and 16 properly. Oh, this was a good one. If we can address the 5 and 16 intersection properly, make it work. Maybe we can remove the Mulberry Street extension north of SR16. I don't have the map in front of me right now, but you know, if you can get rid of that, then you don't have 2 intersections kind of, you know, back to back, and maybe that'll allow traffic to move a little bit more smoothly. Leah's trying to pull that up quickly. I don't know.
So even with the Royal Farms being added to that location? Okay.
Yeah. So again, we'd have to, you know, may not be a great idea, but it was an idea. I don't know. Service road at Milton Village was discussed. Again, the same comment we had about walking and biking connectivity among developments. And then one thing that we talked about when we got to Milton, I think it could apply to Ellendale, is if there's a way to create an overpass somewhere, that becomes the way that you get from one side of town to the other, and you remove several of the traffic lights in Milton. So it will allow a little bit more of a free flow of traffic and use the overpass as a way to get from north to south. So ideas.
Yeah, so we also talked about, you know, again, Milton, George is the representative. And again, any of you who represent more people, obviously, we hope that you're going to take back this conversation, have some conversations with your colleagues, and please send us pages of information, or we're happy to set up another meeting also if you would like to convene some local folks with DELDOT and the project team. We're happy to have supporting conversations. That being said, you know, the interest there was 25 mile per hour speed, slow it down coming through town. And obviously a four lane road is going to be a little out of character with that, but there's, you know, again, that acknowledgement. So we really have that tension here. You know, talked about the northern bypass, talked about southern. I think we have our work cut out for us to come back with some viable options and alternatives for you all to respond to.
The right-of-way acquisition was a sticking point. That was why, because we have McDonald's coming in now to the shopping center, Rowo Farms coming into that location. We have all kinds of commercial entities and then also developments growing right in that segment. And so the thought of, you know, we get like, I believe Glenn pointed it out, we're now back to Lewis, where if we have to acquire right-of-way or an entire parcel, you're talking a lot of money, right? You're not just talking about a typical road wide.
Yeah, so there was that comment, you know, if there's a really nice, smooth, like 35-mile-per-hour road north of town, would people take it? If it was free flowing, they didn't deal with any of the congestion.
If we made it safe enough to travel at 50 even,
yeah, or
would they?
Faster. So looking at some of those trade-offs, whether people would go out of their way to the north, if the character of the roads read a little bit differently. So yeah, I think we have our work cut out for us coming up with some alternatives to put all this together. My group, did I miss anything that we want to make sure everyone hears?
And I think just in general,
all of us, yes.
Is there anything that you said that we didn't record that you want to make sure it's out here?
I want Aaron's ask about the bike ped facilities on the west side.
Okay.
Because Glenn brought up a good point about the Lewis to Georgetown trail, and maybe we look at a Milton to Ellendale trail. And we had already kind of discussed that with Anthony and Paul, so we'll.
Yeah, so there's also the rail right of way, obviously, which is active still, but we didn't talk about that today, but just the south of both towns, there's that corridor coming through.
That's one thing that I get a lot of people around town is asking for more bus options.
I ask that every day.
Yeah.
Just so you know. I met, who is the nice elderly lady who would pound her fist about buses?
Yeah, it's I
love her.
I have a different socioeconomic situation than perhaps
Correct.
Or
correct.
The other area, and that would help.
Dorothy and I still don't understand why there's not a bus that goes from Milford to Milton to Lewis during the summer.
Okay.
But we don't make those decisions. No, so it would stop on Route 1. Like it.
I mean, even if they never pulling routes.
Oh, right. Oh, right. But this was before COVID. So even before COVID, they were saying no. So yeah. But when we went down, when was that? For the Sea Witch Festival, and it was free bus rides. I mean, that parking lot was full by 9 a.m.
Yes, George.
You sort of touched on it, but didn't get a chance to really write it enough on it. So it was Mulberry to 16. And because those two intersect, Mulberry 16 and 5 and 16 are close enough together, that any solution you come up with at 5 and 16 needs to take into account what's going on in Mulberry 16. You can't make the transition. You potentially maybe looking at some term prohibitions with Mulberry 16 might make some sense, especially from Mulberry extended. In the long run,
The extension.
Whatever happens with one needs to take into account the other.
Okay. Any final comment before we wrap up? Okay, just in terms of next steps, obviously we're gonna take everything that we heard tonight, all the feedback, we'll kind of summarize these comments that we heard, we'll get it documented, we'll do all that work. Again, thanks to Steve and Leah and Gemma and everyone, Jen, for creating all the materials. Thanks to you.
And Kristen, who's not online with us anymore.
For participating and so forth. But in terms of expectations for this group, we plan to meet 2 more times as a group. The next meeting is February 13th. And we're going to do kind of the same process, but we're going to focus on 9404. One of the advantages we'll have at the next meeting is, the toolbox, we don't have to go over the toolbox in as much detail because we will already sort of provided that. We'll still summarize it, but we will go over the existing conditions and kind of tee it up. So again, we hope you can be here. even if you're George Cardwell and represent Milton and say, what, I'm not concerned about none. We want you here. We don't want, this is a group that we want everyone to kind of contribute on each of the different corridors. So we'll be back on February 13th for that. Hopefully the weather will treat us as kindly as it did today. And then we'll be back for our final meeting on March 13th, where we will kind of summarize this process and kind of conclude the corridor committee process, which will be ultimately concluded when we do a public workshop at some point that we haven't determined yet. Right? We don't have a date.
Yeah, we don't have a date. It'll be probably in April or May.
April, May. So, and again, this is the work you're doing now. You are not going to see the, it's fitting we're in a school, because the work a school doesn't always get shown for 10, 15, 20, or 30 years. The work we're doing, you're not going to probably see some of the more significant things for 10 or 20 years. I mean, we worked on the US-113 North-South study. It started in 2003. The interchanges, the connection off of 113 to 24, those projects are coming online now. I mean, that was 20 years ago that we were working with a group similar to you all, getting things going. So, we appreciate what you're doing, and it does make a difference. It just may not make a difference tomorrow. It might be a few weeks from now.
Yeah, and thank you for bearing with us. Kristen Offeld from FHI is also a consultant who works on our team. She's the one who created the website for the Corridors Committee. I hope you all have access to that. She's also sending out the constant contact email, which I hope you all received. And we're able to share that with your friends, family, constituents, whoever you need to, for their input as well. If you've not received that, or if you don't have a copy of that, let me know. I will get you a hard copy. But we have had a lot of comments coming in from the general public about the website and being connected to this committee. So thank you again for doing this. Really appreciate it.